Was it a $50 million increase on the sheriff's budget, or was the county commission covering for the sheriff? On the last program, I'd mentioned that I had posted a previous podcast talking certainly about what appeared to be an overinflated budget over the last 4 years with the sheriff's office. Roughly that budget going from $57 million to $106 million over the course of 4 years, or the current administration. I have heard from several people, specifically deputies and maybe their families, wanting more specific information to the budget. These are things that, the average deputy or their families are not familiar with, and they wanted more specific information. And I think in some of those cases, they're just really concerned because of, maybe some of the excuses they're getting from the staff within the sheriff's department about the county commission cutting the budget. But it seems internally, in my opinion, my perspective, that morale is at an all-time low within the sheriff's department. I hope that's not the case, but it does appear to be so. That episode was merely meant to be a cursory review of the Mobile County's budget, specifically the portion allocated to the sheriff's office that typically included jail operations. Now, it's important to point out that once that money is transferred from the county commission to the Mobile County Sheriff's Office, we do not have access to the sheriff's internal budget or how those funds are spent or used internally, or how they're ultimately spent. I think that the budget should be made available to the public. We also briefly looked at the 4 years of budgeting prior to the current administration, which would have been under the former sheriff, Sam Cochran. Now, I do know Sam, and I also know from those that worked and knew Sam that he was very tight with the money. He was very business oriented, and that's kind of what you need as a sheriff in that particular office. It's not all about fighting crime. But again, this was never intended to be a deep dive on the budget. It was a high level, simplified look at the numbers. But I do understand that the massive 86% increase that was reported in that podcast is truly alarming, especially after you hear some of the things we're going to talk about. So I understand why many people wanted me to take a closer look. Now, I don't typically talk about rumors without proof. However, I do know that no one knows like I do just how rumors can taint the morale of a law enforcement organization, especially a large one. Now, the sheriff's office is about a third the size of MPD, but nonetheless, it's still a large outfit when you add in, certainly, the jail operations. But since then, I've been hearing that the sheriff's office have had to go back to the Mobile County Commission and request additional funding throughout the last 3 fiscal years due to cost overruns. Could have been in regards to maybe overtime, equipment purchases, maybe buying too many vehicles that were not budgeted for whatever reason. It could have been buying equipment that was not budgeted. But that simply means there is no real oversight of the budget from my perspective. My understanding is that these requests were handled in executive session with the county commission. Well, what that does is that means that we, the public, were not made available those particular meetings, right? So we don't know what the ask was, but maybe it's a good question for the media to go and ask the county commission if these statements are true or not. But it is what I'm hearing, and now you'll know why when I bring up some of these matters. But we may never know because of the executive session. But here's what I'm hearing now. The sheriff's office reportedly is more than $1 million over budget as I speak today with this podcast, with 8 months still left in the current fiscal year. Perhaps this is why overtime has stopped for the special operations unit, which typically works proactive cases within the county. We know they've worked in Pritchard, certainly out on the interstate, and they do the little things that the sheriff wants them to do to try to help combat crime. Deputies need vehicles, yet it's been reported to me there are around 20 new vehicles sitting in a warehouse in Mobile County right now, but they cannot be issued to the rank and file that need those vehicles desperately because simply stated the sheriff's office can't equip the vehicles quick enough. My understanding, they're only equipping 1 vehicle per month due to funding limitations. The cost to outfit those vehicles should have been budgeted as a part of the budget process last year, before the budget was even submitted and approved by the county commission. The deputies are currently allowed only 2 uniform garments per year for replacement. Now imagine that, 2 for a grown man working day in and day out, especially in this heat in Mobile County. And that my understanding is under the previous sheriff, or Sam Cochran's administration, that number was closer to 6 garments or uniforms per year. I also understand that training and equipment needs are suspended until further notice. If so, how are the deputies getting their training? Does professional development stop because the leader or the administration couldn't properly fund the budget or control the spending of that budget? Oversight, my friends, really does matter. Listen, if these statements are true, then this shows a lack of projecting, planning, and certainly budget oversight. Remember, my friends, fighting crime really is the easy part, although we still do not have an annual crime report that can tell us what the performance measures or just how effective the sheriff's office really has been with fighting crime. It's not just about fighting crime when it comes to being an executive leader in law enforcement. You have to manage the budget, you have to control spending, and you have to have you or someone that has the ability to look at a budget and be able to decipher the information. But the purpose of that first video was straightforward. It was to ask a basic question: where is the money going? That question is not an accusation of theft. It's a concern that the funding may not be reaching the areas, certainly, where it matters most. And that's things like equipment, training, and certainly vehicles. And I gave you a few examples of what I've heard today, which is why I address the rumors. Listen, but at the same time, deputies are being told by the sheriff's office and their staff that these problems are happening because the county commission has cut the sheriff's budget. Well, either the county commission has cut the budget or they're giving the money and the money's not being used wisely. But as I hear that, if that is true, that claim doesn't add up. Well, why? Well, that's a great question. Why? Well, we don't have access to the exact budget numbers with the sheriff's department. But listen, and I'll show you some numbers. We do know between 2018 and 2022, those fiscal years of the budget being presented by the county commission, the sheriff's budget, specifically the sheriff's office and the jail operations, increased by some 5% each year on average. It's just an average. Some were more, some were less. Those numbers were listed as a line item on the budget. However, what's troubling to me is starting in 2023, the budget report lumped several categories into the category of public safety, not just jail operations, not just the sheriff's office, but maybe Strickland Youth Center. Nonetheless, if that 5% trend continued during the past 4 fiscal years under the current administration, then the budget was not cut. I mean, that's a matter of averages. And I'm pretty adamant the budget wasn't cut. It may not have gone up some $50 million over 4 years, but saying that the county commission cutting the sheriff's budget can't possibly be true. Which brings us back to the real question. When we cut the first podcast video about being up $50 million, where is the money going? And now we're left with more questions. How much does the county commission allocate back to the sheriff's office to include the jail operations? Because now it seems like the water's really been muddied on what that line item looks like. Let's go with me and let's look at the budget from the county commission.
Now, these are from the Mobile County Commission website, and you can see here is the 2018 budget. Now, prior to 2023, and we went from 2018 to 22, you can see clearly under law and order is what they call the functional budget. And the sheriff's Metro Jail and the sheriff's office were right here, combined collectively, $46,911,000. Okay, and so these other line items here, circuit court, Strickland Youth Center, you had the district court judges, the advocacy center, all these were listed under law and order, and they all had their own separate breakdown, as you can see. Okay, now we're going to go over to 2019. So in 2019, there was an incremental increase. Again, you have the sheriff's office division and sheriff's Metro Jail, and there's your operating budget collectively sitting, just at $47 million. And then again, now they didn't have that listed up under law and order, but you still had some of the same categories, right? But those operating expenses didn't include appropriations, the district attorney's office, or any of the other line items under law and order that we talked about momentarily. They were listed out separately. Then you go here to the 2020 budget. Again, you're right here at $51 million, and the 2 line item budgets are still separated right there. I mean, there's no confusion about that. And then, of course, we go into 2021. You had a $53 million a year budget, and nothing really changes a whole lot. And then, of course, the last year that it was reported this way was in fiscal year 2022, and the budget was around $57 million. So you remember on the podcast, I said the last sheriff left office essentially at $57 million a year. Now, there was incremental increases in the budget, and it would be. Budgets typically are going to be level funding, or they're going to be incremental increases because the cost of doing business is going to go up. Here's where the problem is. So then we go to the 2023 fiscal year, and it jumps up to $81 million, nearly $82 million. Okay, and so when we did the first podcast, we were looking at it, and again, at a cursory review, you see public safety, operations, and personnel, and you come up with this almost $82 million. But then as we get into this budget, you can see that the actual public safety budget is about $89 million, a little bit about what they did. And of course here, it talks about the 2022 budget was 83 million. And then of course the 2023 budget fell at 87 million. Now, that being said, then you come up here and it talks a little bit about how they decided they were going to do the budget, and they increased these categories. And they said, okay, well, we'll just do one category of public safety, and then we'll add some of these other departments in there. And let me see if I can find it here. We'll scroll through it, maybe on the next page. But anyway, it goes through there. They talk a little bit about it, but I don't know who does these budgets. You would think they would just be standard year after year, but they change so much. But in 2024, here's where it's stated, and it gave a caveat. Public safety activities include those activities that provide for law enforcement, security, inmate, and criminal court activities. Examples are of public safety activities include Mobile County Sheriff's Office and the jail, these two. So it looks to me like they went in and they've added these other ones, but why did you change that on the line item budget? At least prior to 23, it was somewhat transparent where you could see what division, the Sheriff's Department, the Metro Jail, the minimum security, you could see where the money was being spent. And it just seems like they've muddied the water. Then we come here to 2025, and it's essentially the same thing, but they just kind of give a breakdown here of what the budget increase certainly would be. But you have to go through it. To me, they've muddied the water significantly in here. But if you come here, so we're in 2025, and the 2025 budget for, you can see, public safety increased to $104 million. Now, that's including these categories here. That includes the Sheriff's Office, and includes Metro Jail, but some of these other areas as well, where you no longer have that line item budget, so you don't really see the monies that's being spent. And then it goes into 2026 was the first fiscal year. You can see here under public safety, the last ending amount for the fiscal year that we're in now is $106 million, $2 million, $2 million over what it was last year. Now, all right, that's great, that's fine, and maybe they did this for simplicity, so they can just show in rough numbers, these categories of where the money's being spent, but it doesn't show detailed information. So whereas we initially said it was a $50 million increase, now I would say we don't even know. At least prior to 2023, we could go and look and say, hey, there were incremental increases in the sheriff's budget. But now you've convoluted what you've sent from the county commission to the sheriff's department, and I think that's so disingenuous. The people are not going to understand it. We still don't know where the money went, and I just really find that to be problematic. But more importantly than that, I want to go into something and show you kind of a caveat real quick, if I may. And this was the part that was kind of troubling to me. And, all we can do is speculate. And I know speculating is not always the appropriate thing to do when you don't have all the information, but that's what we do, right? So this was not in any of the other years' budget that I've seen, and I've downloaded these other than the 2026 budget that we're in now. But, excuse me. Read this. It says, new policy related to budgets of elected officials. As the budgetary authority, the Mobile County Commission has the responsibility to ensure that all county funds are appropriated and expended in a manner that protects the financial stability of the county. In exercising this authority, the Commission requires the following of all elected officials whose offices are funded through Commission-approved budgets. Wow, that's a warning. That is a warning set over the bow of the boat. That is a shot over the bow that is telling these elected officials, you're spending way too much money. And it seems to me the County Commission is trying to cover their own back end, right? Now, we're only talking about the Sheriff's Department and all the things that I told you, cutting overtime, not being able to get vehicles equipped. We got 20 vehicles, if that is the case, sitting around in the garage when the deputies need them, who are jumping their cars off. That's problematic. And then it goes on to say, number one, the filling of vacancies shall be preceded by a budget check conducted by the Mobile County Finance Department to verify the sufficient funding is available prior to proceeding with hiring process. Wow. That tells me that, the sheriff's office should have a competent person. And we talked about that. I think the lady may have an art degree of some sort. I'm not sure. That's what we're told, not a finance degree. Apparently, we don't have, my understanding is the chief deputy, Frank Cassidy, is supposed to be over the money, or at least the oversight of the budget. Now, this tells me if this is applicable to the sheriff's department, that means there's no accountability, there's no budget oversight, and apparently they're just driving a ship with no rudder and just kind of going with the waves and the motions of the ocean, if you will. I mean, that's terrible. And then, of course, the second one, so essentially the first one is also saying you can't manage your budget if it's about the sheriff's department. You're going to have to send your information and get a budget check with the county commission's finance director or department to ensure that you have the money. That's what it's telling me. That's terrible. Effectively, immediately, number 2 says a temporary moratorium is placed on the awarding of merit raises, of special merit raises, until such time as the commission establishes a formal review and approval process. Now, again, I don't know if it's true. I have heard from multiple sources that the sheriff has systemically given friends and some of those in the clique in his office, especially on the administration floor, multiple merit raises. Maybe I probably need to go through the Mobile County Personnel Board papers to see who all got the raises. But what that tells me is that confirms what I've also heard about. Maybe people are just getting merit raises and they're just coming up left and right. My understanding is the sheriff has a driver, and that individual was sent up for a merit raise within the last few months. And it's my understanding the county commission said no. And so if that is the case, but this also begs the question for me, that how come the county commission has not already established a formal review and approval process of the merit? The merit system has been around since, I think, the 50s. This is unbelievable to me. And then, of course, number 3 says each elected official is expected to manage overtime costs within their budgeted amount. Should overtime expenses trend toward exceeding budgeted levels, the commission may require that operational funds within the department's existing budget be reallocated to cover anticipated increase to overtime costs. Okay, so that confirms some of the rumors that I've heard that the last 3 fiscal years, the sheriffs had to go back because of cost overruns, in particular with the overtime. And of course, now I hear, the sheriff's department is $1 million over. If that is true, this order right here had to be because of the lack of experience, qualifications, and the ability to run the sheriff's budget, which is problematic, and it should be problematic for each and every one of you citizens.
Look, I am a citizen before I am a political candidate for any job. Government budgets should be simple, and they should be transparent. It was somewhat transparent prior to 2023 by listing the line item budget as Metro Jail operations and certainly the Mobile County Sheriff's Office administration part. It was a little bit transparent, more than it is now. But now, 23 and forward, we know now that they've lumped several categories under the public safety category. It gives the appearance that there is something to hide. The 2026 budget report also stipulated a new set of rules or a policy for elected officials in Mobile County who receive funding from the commission. Guys, let me just be upfront with you. At the end of the day, this community deserves clear answers, transparency. We don't need finger pointing. And it would be nice if an independent oversight organization or even the media would step up and do a real investigative journalism as to the budget, certainly of the sheriff's department, rather than play politics in the public arena. Taxpayers have a right to know how their money is being spent. I don't believe taxpayers would do anything to prohibit law enforcement from doing the job. They want to make sure that we have the equipment to do that job. But when it appears that we have something to hide and we can't show with clear transparency where the money's going, that is problematic. Listen, deputies deserve honesty, not excuses. Until there is real transparency, the questions won't go away, and neither should the demand for answers. My friends, my name is Paul Prine, and I am running for sheriff for Mobile County, Alabama. I am asking certainly for your vote and your financial support to take back the sheriff's office, restore it back to service and integrity. The primary voting day is May 19th, 2026. Mark your calendar. My friends, we can't do it without you. We need you, and we'll certainly see you again on the next program, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. God bless.